Hello, welcome to another edition of Monday's Workbench. This week we had an IXCR race at Popcorn, one of our favorite places. Saturday was great weather, the quads had a perfect track, and then Saturday night it decided it was going to rain on us. Turned into another mud fest, but we survived it and managed to not tear up our bikes. Garrett finished third in the morning Open C class, and I ran the Vet C, which I got second. Only made one lap, but that's all I needed. But anyway, today I want to talk to you about checking out a used bike that you might think you want to buy that's for sale. So this is a 2018 250F. This was originally my bike, and then it became Garrett's practice bike. This bike will be for sale. We're asking $4,200 for it. I think it's got around 82 hours on it, and I know the bike very well because it once was mine, but we've kept it here in the fleet. It's time to move it along. So a couple of things that you want to look for when you're looking to go buy a used bike is you want to work out the particulars, whether you're looking on it at Craigslist or whatever. You might think about meeting at a local place, maybe like a Walmart parking lot, something like that. Or if you know the guy, you can go to his house, but just be careful and cautious on that. But you've located a bike, you think it's what you want. I'm gonna give you some tips on what I do to look for on a used bike. Most of the things that I'm gonna point out on this bike are things that are gonna get fixed before I sell it, but when you're looking at the bike, these are things that I would look for. So I just start out at the front of the bike. When you meet the guy, you want to check to see if the engine's been started. If it's been started, then that kind of indicates maybe it's a hard starter or something like that. I like to see my bikes cold so that you know how it's going to react when you get it home later, and you don't know all the tricks to starting it and whatever. So keep that in mind. It's not a game changer, but keep that in mind. So you want to look at the bike overall condition. This bike's got some cracked plastic, some scuffs. Obviously we've used it quite a bit, but I just start at the top and then work my way around. Check out the bars and the grips. Grips and stuff are inexpensive, but bars start to get a little expensive, so make sure they're straight. And then just go along, take a peek at your radiators, make sure they're not bent, because those tend to be expensive. And now's when you want to identify if you see something that the radiator's bent, maybe it's going to leak on you in the future. So I just keep walking around. I'm looking at the tires. These tires will be replaced, and that's something to be in consideration of whether or not how much more money you're going to put into the bike. So as I move across the front, I'm checking the fork seals, making sure they're not showing signs of leaking or weeping. A little bit's fine, but we've already talked about how to clean out some fork seals. And then you want to peek at the brakes and give the tire a spin, make sure the rotor isn't bent. You can also look at the rim too, make sure it's not bent. So as I move over here, I'm just working my way around the bike. I'm still talking to the guy. I'm taking a peek at the foam and the seat cover. Seat covers are relatively inexpensive, but these things start adding up if this is going to be your bike. So checking out the case wear, and you can tell a lot by a bike based upon the wear of the foot pegs. If they look like they've been painted, they're trying to cover something up. Just keep that in mind. They're trying to maybe paint over something that to kind of hide some wear. But this bike obviously has some wear here, a little bit of wear on this area. So I'm moving back around, checking the exhaust. Is it stock exhaust? Is it aftermarket? This one's got a little damage. This one's all stock. And then I'm just working back and I'm looking at the rear brakes. These are still in good condition. Obviously it's going to need a rear tire. So I've checked the foot pegs, the brake feels to be working correctly. While you're on this side, you can check the front brake. So this is a good time too, maybe just pull on, see if it's got adequate compression, which it does. I can't even pull it over, so it tells you it's still pretty good before you try to start it up. Looking at the fender, making sure it's not broke. Again, all the plastic stuff is relatively inexpensive, but it's going to add up over time if you need to replace a bunch of it. So I'm going to spin it around, show you the other side. Over here, you're checking, once again, you've got a missing bolt. No big cause of alarm, but just keep in mind, if you start seeing a bunch of mismatched bolts, maybe the bike hasn't been taken quite as good a care of as you hoped for. But having one missing isn't a game changer. And then we're looking at our regular controls. Up here is the original kill switch on. You know, you're feeling the clutch, is that nice and free, you know. Checking this radiator, and then looking down here for wear on the cases. And then your shifter lever, this can tell you a lot about how much the bike's used. This bike has almost 83 hours on it, and really it shows pretty little wear on that shifter. If you see the shifter that's been wore a lot, that means the bike has quite a bit of time on it, you know, maybe more than 100 hours. So looking at the pegs, and then of course you want to take a look at the chain and sprockets. This one here could be replaced. I'm going to replace it before we sell it. But you want to look at that because that's going to add up, maybe 130 bucks right there. So keep an eye on the chain and sprockets. You're also looking at the engine, seeing if there's bolts on there that look like they've been wrenched on or maybe stripped or something, because the guy's going to tell you the history, but if there's stuff showing signs of a lot of engine work, maybe you need to know about that too. Anyway, as I move a little farther back to the bike, I can look in here. I can see in there that it's got an air filter. It looks like it's probably dirty. Don't hesitate to take off the seat or the panel to take a look at that air box. That's going to tell you a lot about the maintenance of the bike. You know, we run these bikes off-road and we take a pretty good beating to them, so it's not going to be perfect, but you know how hard it is to keep stuff clean, and if this guy's done the correct maintenance and kept stuff clean, it's going to carry over and probably be a good bike for you. So, all right, I'm moving back, checking out the rear wheel. Now, we've already checked both the front and rear tires to see if they're true. You're also checking the rotors to make sure that they're not bent. You can tell that by if you hear a little, there's probably some kind of bend in the rotor. Not the end of the world. You want to look at and see if the rotors have been worn, you know, to where they're pretty thin. You can tell by looking at them on the wear marks. All right, so I've checked everything else. I'm looking, now I want to look at, what about my wheel bearings? What about my swing arm bearings? Those are things you want to check out because that can get pretty involved in replacing those. And you know, I've already showed you a little video on changing those, and it's a lot of work, but it's not the end of the world. So if I want to check like the lower swing arm or the lower shock bearing, so I've got the bike up on the stand and I can reach over and pull, and if I feel movement, then that lower shock mount or bearing is probably going to need to replace. It's not very expensive, but it's pretty common. And that also may indicate that we got swing arm problems or linkage problems too. So now the next thing I'm going to do is check the actual wheel bearing. So you can just pull side to side. You can feel a little bit of movement if there's a problem. Actually, there's no movement in this one. And at the same time, you're kind of checking the swing arm too. So if you determine that there's some movement, you want to put the rear end of the tire down, and now you can pretty much determine if it's swing arm or wheel bearing. So that's an indication something in there needs a little work. So keep an eye on that. Front tire, I'm just gonna basically pull it side to side. I don't have any movement in this bike. And then you want to check the swing or the actual head stop up here, triple tree, and you want to pull up on it, see if there's any movement in that. There's none in this bike. So after that, I'd probably try to take a test ride if that's possible. A lot of guys don't want you riding their bike. I understand that. You definitely want to get it started up. You want to fire it up, see how easy it is to start. That's when you're also going to check compression, and then you can listen to the engine. Is it making a weird noise, something you're not comfortable with? And if you can't ride it, at least shift it through the gears. It's in neutral now, but then you can check and make sure you got all gears working correctly. So if you can't ride it, at least start it up, and then you don't have to go anywhere, but see if it engages the clutch correctly, and maybe make sure it goes to neutral smoothly, things like that. One thing I forgot is you want to ask them what kind of coolant they've been running. You want to stick with the same kind of coolant. Also, you want to ask them what kind of oil they've been using. You want to kind of stay close to the parameters of what they're using. This bike's got Evans coolant in it, so you're going to want to know that. You can't put regular antifreeze in it once you put the Evans in it. So I know there's a bunch of other stuff to consider when you're buying a used bike. Knowing the owner is a pretty good one, and if you know them as a racer, you know how they ride, so you got to take that in consideration. So you also know their personality. How well are they going to take care of their bikes? So that's something to consider too. If you don't know them, then you're just kind of taking a chance, and who knows, the guy that buys this bike may have trouble on day 2, or he may ride it up to 100, 200 hours and never have trouble with it. As far as I know, this is a good bike, and I wouldn't feel guilty to sell anybody this bike. So anyway, this coming up weekend we have Crossroads up in Black Hawk, way up north in Plymouth, Indiana. It's a double points, so Stacy and Garrett will definitely be attending. Carissa may attend. I've got to work this weekend, so I probably won't make it. And then Sunday we're going to Stony Lonesome for round 3. So a lot of traveling that they've got ahead of them, and anyway, hopefully next Monday we won't be tearing anything up like we did this weekend. We didn't tear anything up, so that's good. Anyway, thanks for watching. Continue to share and like, comment. What else things have I missed? I know there's plenty of things also to look for, but I appreciate everybody's help and support, and show us your tips.